Now welcome to another lightning response video, where before I get to the question, I just want to quickly say thank you for the many great responses on yesterday's video, where I was maybe a bit more frustrated than I normally am. There were a ton of really good comments that I appreciated, and also a ton of questions left on that one. And I may try to do a video in the coming days that just sort of goes through a lot of those and tries to kind of answer them in a rapid fire style. But for now, let's get to this question from Derek Lopez, who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think the Ahsoka show did Sabine extremely dirty? Because in Rebels, she may have been a hothead and made stupid choices, but she gets chastised for it and learns from her mistakes. Yet for some reason, they made her so bitchy and unlikable. And when she made a really dumb choice, like letting Thrawn return, she doesn't get chastised and instead gets a pat on the back. It's like she didn't learn her lessons from when she helped the Empire build weapons they used to kill her people. What are your thoughts?" And yeah, I do think Sabine could have been handled better all around in this, though I think one of the biggest issues with her, as well as with Ahsoka actually, is where the story kind of has to start them off at. That it has them both sort of broken from the very beginning, when both of these characters from elsewhere or other shows, they'd always been very upbeat and quick-witted and almost like spark plugs, for a lack of a better way of putting it. They both used to inject a life into the story, where here, the way they are now, it tends to kind of suck the life out of the story, which feels very off for them. And I'm not saying it doesn't make sense for the story or for them to be this way. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense that they're both starting in a low place, or that they have this very grim and stoic demeanor, especially in the case of Ahsoka, where Sabine is more just kind of angry at the world, or at the galaxy, I guess. And that's of course because she's never really come to terms with the loss of Ezra, which we understand, and she's recently lost her family in the Night of 1,000 Tears, which we learned happened at the end of the war, or a few years ago in story, if it happened during, say, Operation Cinder, which is my guess since it goes along with what that was basically all about. That being destroying worlds after Palpatine's death as his sort of last command, or last command before his final order when he somehow came back. And so anyway, I do think the problem is we're kind of getting the polar opposites of what we're used to when it comes to these characters, and that not only does it feel, again, kind of off, but there's not a ton of nuance to the performances, which I don't actually think is their fault, or the fault of the actresses, I should say. I hate to say it, but I do think it's more Dave Filoni's writing and or directing here that's the problem. I think they were both told to be this very certain way, especially Ahsoka, so that later in the story when Ahsoka resolves her issues with Anakin, you'd see this very visible change in her to go along with her visibly also becoming Ahsoka the White, which she certainly does change. She becomes a little more upbeat in the final few episodes. Same goes for Sabine when she finds Ezra. She starts to feel more like Sabine from Rebels again, since those two have always had this kind of fun, playful banter going back and forth between them, like they do here in the show again. And since the antics of Ezra have always given her, shall we say, this kind of ammunition to be this sharp-witted yet good-spirited character that we know her to be, there's never really been any true hostility towards Ezra from Sabine. It always does indeed kind of come off as this brother-sister relationship between the two. But here, Sabine being with Ahsoka doesn't really give her the opportunity to be the more fun and almost playful-like character she is when she's with Ezra. And instead she's more angry and snarky with her, and as I keep saying, it just feels off for the character. Plus, the conflict between them, between Ahsoka and Sabine, has been manufactured off-screen. We're told there was a previous attempt to train her and something went wrong, and that unseen incident is the basis for the problems between them now. But we don't fully understand or really even begin to understand what went wrong. We're just told by the story to believe that these two are now at odds with each other because of what happened before. And again, I think the script or directing does them no favors, especially early on when we get these very long pauses between their responses to each other. And I know some will, or did when I mentioned it initially in my review back then. They got upset at me and say, "You're just nitpicking everything and blah blah blah, you hate all Star Wars, you know the drill." But it's really the subtle or little things that can sell a performance or can turn an average one into a great one. Timing can be absolutely everything. And I invite you to compare the early scenes between Sabine and Ahsoka with pretty much any scenes between Baylan and Shin. The delivery, the mannerisms, and timing of Ray Stevenson is just better. And Ivana Sakno is equally impressive. I mean, she's also playing an angry character, right? More angry or in a different way than Sabine, sure. But she's playing a similar kind of mindset as Sabine, but I believe her more because of the performance. And so these two, Balin and Shin, whether you are consciously aware of their great performances or not while you're watching, they are instantly more believable and interesting because they feel more genuine and you feel a connection between the characters. They feel like they're reacting to each other as real people. There's a range of emotion there, even if it's subtle, and it's not just two people reading lines and taking long pauses between them to build tension. And so now going back to the question, or another part of it, I do indeed think it is, it's a little strange or not great for the story that Sabine never gets chastised or truly has to face any consequences or repercussions for her actions. At least not yet, or that we see in the show. I've certainly mentioned more than once about how odd it was, or that it was just plain kind of lazy. That it completely skipped over Ezra at all confronting Sabine over what she did, that she is essentially responsible for Thrawn getting home, all because she wanted to come and find him. I'd really like to know how Ezra feels about that. It also seems that Ahsoka is okay with that, or so the show implies. It implies she has learned to accept Sabine for who she is, which, that is great and all, and under most circumstances, I'd agree we sometimes must learn to accept the flaws and mistakes of those we love. That's part of loving someone, that you love the whole package, the good and the bad. But that doesn't mean you don't try to help someone get better, or that you don't hold them accountable when they really, really, really screw up. Like when you do something that will likely lead to war and the death of millions upon millions of people across the galaxy. You don't kind of pat them on the back afterwards and more or less say, you did you and I get and support that. And sure, you could make the argument that in the moment, on the way to stopping Thrawn, which is when this happened, it really doesn't do any good to sort of make Sabine feel bad about her choice. This isn't really the time and place to bring it all up and to chastise her. This isn't going to help you stop Thrawn. But I mean, it's not like anyone would have ever patted Anakin on the back after he cut off Windu's hand and allowed Palpatine to then kill him and then to secure his hold on the galaxy, ensuring the suffering of billions upon billions of people for about 25 years. No one would have said to Anakin, we get you did that for the chance to save your wife, don't sweat it, we're fine with it. Not to mention, Anakin paid a very, very steep price for his mistake. He ended up not only falling to the dark side, becoming a sort of slave to the dark side, but he wound up in the suit as well. That is an absolute daily torture for him, which is then one of the things that makes his story and Star Wars itself so great, I'd argue. It's all about choices and the consequences that follow, something we all must learn in our lives as well, that we must choose carefully sometimes. There are consequences for our actions. And thus far anyway, and this could certainly change going forward, but Sabine has faced virtually no consequences whatsoever, or beyond getting stuck in another galaxy, which is, not the best thing to ever happen to somebody. But it's certainly not on par with what happened to Anakin, especially when you really think about it. She did something that was similar to what he did. I mean, she literally handed over an object that could lead to a full-scale war that, as I said, could and likely will see the death of millions of people. Not to mention, as far as she knows, and we the audience know better of course, but Thrawn could win the coming war and the Empire could reign again, all because of what she did. All because she wanted to see Ezra again. And all Ezra did was say nothing in response, despite all he gave up the first time to stop Thrawn. And all Ahsoka did was basically shrug her shoulders and almost admit she'd been the one at fault for being too hard on her in the first place and not accepting who she is. This is generally not the lesson Star Wars tries to teach. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about how Sabine was handled in this series and what you think about her not exactly facing any consequences just yet for her actions. Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video, and like I said at the top, I'll likely do a video in the coming days where I try to answer a bunch of questions all at once. Might be a longer video, but I think that'll be okay. Either way, do leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.